Hi everybody, this is Sean Joyce with Cyber in 60, and today for my guest I have Beau Lotto, professor, neuroscientist, and CEO of several startups. Welcome, Beau.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
All right, as you can see, he has a lot more titles than I do, so I'm happy he's here. All right, first thing is, most CEOs out there, exactly 40%, think their business model is not economically viable for the next 10 years. And they feel like they're going to have to change. What advice do you have for those CEOs?
The advice I have for the CEOs is to really actually embrace that feeling, and rather than have that feeling be a scary feeling, have that feeling be an exciting feeling. Because one of the biggest barriers to these business models and businesses in general is the fear of change. And so we talk a lot about how the mechanisms change, the process have changed, but the fundamental problem is the thing that I talked about earlier about the first step, but actually there's a step that comes before that, which is the first step is to sort of deviate from what you know. The step that comes before that is the desire to deviate, the desire to do something different, right? So rather than seeing that as something scary, see that as a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful thing for your business and for you as a leader.
So talk to me. So I didn't mention author too. So in your book, Deviate, you talk about how leaders can actually bring innovation through how they bring their groups together through caring and other things. And it leads to, helping CEOs do that innovation because it's scary. Like I would even say in my small business to say all of a sudden, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to switch. How do you create that environment successfully?
But in a way, see, that's interesting because your question has inherent in it the idea that it's scary. But that's actually kind of an assumption. Why is it scary? So if you think about the brain state that we employ when we actually are excited to change, I mean, think about for yourself, what is the one place where you actually love uncertainty? Because there is a place
Technology.
Okay,
I love it.
So, and it applies across multiple aspects of what you do. So in fact, we're going to do some of it this afternoon. What is the one thing that where you actually celebrate it? You don't just tolerate it, you celebrate it. It's play. So play is actually where we love uncertainty. But play is not just a thing, it's actually a way of seeing the world. So what's interesting is that if we're approaching it in a non-play aspect, like we're approaching it from the perspective of efficiency, then that possibility of change is really scary because it means I'm going to have to step away from what I know. But actually, if I embrace and embody that sense of play, now I actually want to do that. I actually want to do things differently. And so it's not just about creating a system that does this. It's actually creating a culture, but that culture begins with the leader. It's not just a system, it's actually a way of being. And the leader actually has to embody this. They have to apply this in their, not just their professional life, but their personal life.
All right, so help me embrace this play, because I'm going to need some help on this, Beau. So every quarter, I'm looking at my own P&L, right? And we are driven by numbers, as most corporations are, in making sure they're going to sort of have that profitability. How do you balance that playfulness and creating sort of that dare to be great or that fun atmosphere that you're referring to, and at the same time, right, be accountable to your shareholders and that responsibility?
So what if they're not different? What if they're actually one and the same thing? So if you think about innovation, innovation has two sides. It has efficiency and has creativity. And so the wise leaders actually do both. It's not being at the edge of chaos, it's actually being on the edge of chaos on average. So it's creating a culture where you actually are part of an innovation spiral. So I call it either innovation spiral or discovery spiral. You start with knowing, you start with certainty. But then you actually have to innovate, which means you actually have to step away from certainty. But it's actually a systematic process. You deviate, you diversify, you distill, and then you do. You come back to doing, you come back to knowing. So once we start understanding the principles that are underneath it, you can see actually how they're actually fundamentally related. They're not different things. They're actually a process and a mindset that actually achieves both simultaneously.
All right, which kind of goes to your principle about deviating right? And
Yeah.
movement is life.
Movement's life, and it's having a culture that inspires people to move. And I don't mean, what I actually mean by is motivates people to move. So people will not move, people will not change if they don't realize that they actually can change. And they understand the process of change itself, and then they understand what it is they should change, which I would argue is perception. And then what's the culture that empowers all of that? And once people have that sense and have that understanding, now they actually want to move. Now they want to step forward. Because it's fascinating, when you ask people, do you want to change? Almost everyone says, oh yeah, I want to be better, that's brilliant, I want to change. And then the question is, why don't they do it? And the answer is because what they want is the outcome of the change. They don't want the process of the change, right? Because that's effortful. But a lot of it is because they just don't know how.
And how, if you were saying to our viewers out there, how do we start it? We say, listen, I'm listening to Beau. He's making a lot of sense. I realize we've got to change some things up. Give me some concrete, simple steps as a leader that you can take.
One of the most concrete, simple steps you can do is to think about, is to better understand perception. How and why am I seeing things in the first place? What are the things that are my barriers to seeing differently? Which is what we were talking about here. So what are those fundamental barriers that actually I come into the world with? These are evolved strategies. They're there for a reason, but when you don't have awareness of them, they're blocks. You're just behaving reflexively, and you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. So the first is awareness. And that's why I call it going from knowing to understanding. When you get that understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, now you have the possibility of taking agency over it. So that would be the first step. And before that, it's actually having the desire to have that understanding, right? And that ultimately is a choice. You have to make that decision for yourself. And one way of doing that is actually to show you the significance of what you will achieve if you're willing to make that step, to go from knowing to understanding.
All right, so some great advice for you leaders out there, and it's been my pleasure to be with Beau Lotto. Beau, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
All right.